Hello, guys. We are live. The One Fun Guy podcast is in the studio today with my guest, Maddie. Maddie, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little about yourself, and we'll get talking about the mental health topic.
Thank you for having me. My name is Maddie. I'm the founder of Janie Support Group. Currently, I'm a peer support specialist, MSW student, and I also live with serious mental illness. And it was an incident with that led me to dedicate my life to healing and recovery for other people. And that's why I'm here today.
Well, I'm so happy that you are here. So let's start from that incident. Can you kind of walk us through what happened and then the process that you are where you're at now?
Definitely. So I started having mental health symptoms when I was 4. Um, I had developed PTSD from a traumatic incident. I won't trauma dump, but
No, no
um,
worries.
and then when I was in middle school, I started developing further symptoms, and it really just kind of was an evolution process, and I really
Okay.
couldn't fully articulate until I was about 19. At that time, I was diagnosed with what's called bipolar disorder, but that
Okay.
changed again after many hospitalizations and crises. And today, I live with what's called schizoaffective bipolar type, PTSD,
Okay.
and anxiety. And then I was kind of going through the motions. I call it simply living to survive.
Okay.
And I was heavily medicated. And in 2023, my doctor called about another medication. And I was like, I'm like 15, whatever, I'll try one more. And at that time, I couldn't process emotions. I was 420 pounds. I was numb to the world. I was suicidal. And when I took this new medication, I began to feel life again. Like I was crying, I was happy, I was moving. And I did so well that she took me off other medications. But when you live with schizoaffective bipolar type, you have to treat mania, depression, and psychosis.
Okay.
She took me off my mania medication, and I became manic and didn't realize it. Um, and a few months later, when I did realize it, I realized I was also in a severe psychotic state. And I lived like that working for a little while, and then eventually advocated and was placed on medical leave from work. And she gave me some treatments that didn't work and caused me to relapse with my addiction. And when that didn't work, she increased the medication called lithium. And what lithium is a heavy metal to treat bipolar disorder. But a qualification for taking lithium is that your doctor obtains blood work periodically to make sure your kidneys, your liver's all okay, make sure you're not toxic. She didn't get blood levels on me. And pretty quickly, I lost the ability to walk, talk, swallow, breathe. I was in diapers. My husband was my 24/7 caretaker. And I lived like that for a few weeks. Um, until I got enough strength to say, take me to the hospital. And I went to the hospital and they told me and my husband that I was going to die. I was dying. And I was pretty much just seeing life in the form of hallucinations at that point. And
Okay.
I have periods of amnesia. So most of what I know from that period are what's been told to me. And it was a 3 weeks in the hospital and a long road of recovery when I got home. And I had no idea what was happening to me. I didn't know where I was and how I got there. And when I read my medical records, when I learned to read again, I had spent so long thinking that death was the only answer, and here I was cheating death. I was supposed to have silent syndrome. I was supposed to be in a vegetative state the rest of my life, and I
Hmm.
wasn't. So I really submerged myself into the world of coping skills and recovered at an exponential rate. And I decided that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was sick and tired of the lack of services. So I started J&E Support Group, got into graduate school, all with the mission of making mental health, opening the conversation, advocacy work, and making services equitable, affordable, and accessible.
Well, that's fantastic. How do you feel now? Like as we
I
sit here today?
I love life.
Okay.
I love
Great.
living. I'm so good. I try to look at things in a positive manner, even when they're not so positive, and I think that helps me get through all the stuff.
Sure. So I know you touched on it before for the J&E support group. What made you want to do that? Obviously, besides all this stuff, How was your treatment when you were going through it? Was it affordable? Did your insurance cover it? Like, walk us through that, because a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have insurance these days, and there aren't a lot of options when you don't have insurance.
Right. So where I live is a mental health desert. There's not a lot of services to begin with. And at the time, I did have insurance through my job, but even with insurance, these services are expensive. I mean, my hospital bill was outrageous. Um, so if I didn't have insurance, I was probably looking between 200 to $500,000 just to save my life, and that's not the MRIs, the CT scans that came along when I got home. And now I have a different insurance that I pay for out of pocket, which is expensive in itself. And
Mm-hmm.
before I went on that, I researched, I because I take very expensive medications. Nothing else will work for me. So I found a company that stated they would go to pay for my doctor and pay for my medication. But when I went to the pharmacy to pick it up, they wanted $1,500. Who has
Right.
$1,500 a month on medication? I don't.
Sure.
So I had to jump through a lot of hoops to find a coupon. And I find it to be really outrageous because I didn't ask for this, right? This is the way I was born. Yet I'm expected to come out of pocket so much for life saving tools and not just the medication. I mean, I attend therapy. My insurance doesn't pay for that. I have to go to a psychiatrist once a month, and that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health care is extremely expensive, and finding a doctor that treats you equitably is just as hard to find.
Sure. Now, when you started J&E, what was the kind of baseline for this program? Was it to get the help you needed, or was it to save money, or was it like all kind of in one? Like, how, because most people don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to start a foundation or a support group or something like that. It's a process. Can you kind of just walk us through that, like what made you, eventually say, I should be helping other people?
Right. So I had somebody help me along the way, and I found it. I mean, it saved my life, and I wanted to give that to other people. And I was aware of how nonprofits worked. I worked for a nonprofit at the time,
Okay.
and I knew that that was a good avenue. And my initial idea was to start with advocacy and support groups. But my support groups are 100% free. I don't charge anybody anything, and I don't charge anybody anything for extra services. So the idea was just to make a community, a supportive community for people like me. Our initial group was for people living with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and bipolar disorders. And it was so successful that we now have two in-person groups. And when I was starting this, I knew I needed some clout behind my name to be taken seriously in the community. Um, so I got into graduate school with the idea of providing free therapy, like licensed therapy. But what I've learned along the way is that my unique voice and my unique experience makes me a great advocate. So my dream with J&E eventually when I graduate is to get into advocacy, program development, possibly policy change, because there's a lot of unequitable policies out there. And what we're doing now is adding on trainings and community events to try to end the stigma in our community because it is so high. We do this, we're planning a mental health simulation to give you an idea of what it's like to walk the day in a life of someone with mental illness. My partner and I conduct speaking services to educate, spread awareness and hope. And then we also offer training for agencies just to educate a little bit, especially about workplace inclusion when it comes to mental health.
Mm-hmm. So, in your community, do you guys have like crisis centers or places you could send people if they do come to you and say, listen, something's wrong with my meds, or I can't get access to them and I'm really feeling in a dark spot? Do you have a place you can send them to? I know a lot of towns and municipalities now are starting to build these centers, or at least open the hospital to that, having staff that could deal with that, as well as just, you know, trauma from an accident or something like that.
So I live in a really small town and we don't have a hospital, we don't have anything, but the neighboring town has a hospital, but they don't have inpatient units.
Okay.
It's sit in a chair and we'll try to find you a place or make you a crisis plan. There's a behavioral health center there, where you can go and stay inpatient for a couple of days. And I'm not sure if they find you a bed at a bigger hospital. So if I had a client in crisis in that area, I would take them to the behavioral health center or take them to a hospital outside of our area that can treat them efficiently.
Okay. Now, when you like, for those who are listening that don't understand what a crisis center is or a behavioral health center is, it's temporary. It's very, very short term. The window might be a couple hours to maybe a couple days. It's not weeks or months, where some people really need that help 24/7 for an extended period of time to get their meds right. Because a lot of times it's always quick fix, right? They deal with their acute manic state that they're in. And once they get out of it, they're just back into society again. And then they have nowhere to turn or nowhere to go. So a lot of the times they just end up right back in there. Or unfortunately, they find themselves in jail because they have nowhere to go. And now they're trespassing. And, the police will come and show up and take them away and say, listen, you're not wanted here. You keep showing up here. You have either go away or go with us. And they say, I'd rather go with you, right? It's a safety net, right? It's a sense of security. And so when I mention like mental health centers and crisis centers, a lot of towns now are starting to awaken to the idea that, jail is not the right place for individuals, but in order to get the help they need it long term. And a lot of the crisis centers are indeed why they call crisis, because when they're in that acute crisis, that's where they go. But in, maybe 72 or 96 hours when they're done, they just say, okay, well, we are ready for the next person. You're out on the street again. Go wherever you need to go. And family members sometimes have a hard time coping with it because, parents don't know what to do when their kids come home and they say, well, I have PTSD or I was diagnosed with bipolar. They're like, well, I'm not going to put you on meds. Like, you're just a normal kid. And then they ignore the problem. So a lot of it is, from what my experiences are dealing with it, is that there aren't a lot of options out there for the parents or the person going through it. And I think that, in our modern day society, we need to start recognizing that, right? Because a lot of people think, like you just said it earlier, the only alternative is dying at that point, right? And some people say, well, I'd be better off just not being here. And obviously that's not the case, right? Like, life is great and you want to live a long and healthy life. But a 15-year-old kid that says I have nothing to live for, how do that those are the people that, you have to help them. And parents don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And sometimes if there are no centers, they're just coping. And how they do it is up to them, right? Whether it's drugs or alcohol, or whether it's, trying to find a group, or, but there aren't many around. In your experience, how do you feel about that? Are you like trying to organize, the community awareness?
Definitely. It's a huge problem. And like you said, if we think about it historically, so like in the 20th century, most of that time was institutional care. People were locked away for significant periods of time in deplorable situations, if not their whole life. And when it moved to community care, what it's supposed to be today, it left many people unhoused, unsecured. They were dumped on the streets from institutions. And it left people unmedicated, untreated, unable to afford treatment, and they ended up getting arrested. So our prisons are filled with so many people who are really just in mental health crisis, and it's a huge problem. And I have a huge interest in trying to formulate a mental health court in my area. I've been doing a lot of research on this. The Bar Association online had some information. I'm trying to get some more from them because it's not about, because when you have mental health and you're locked in a prison, 9 times out of 10, you go into solitary. And what does that do for your mental health? It's a huge problem. They're not getting the treatment they need. Mental health care in our jails and prisons is not what it should be. It's a huge issue. So I try to speak about these things and bring awareness. And I have a lot of community partners that I try to engage about this as well. It takes education, it takes voices, and it takes action. And, where I live, the stigma is so high that there's not the most action being done by enough people. Because if it doesn't affect them directly, they don't see it as an issue. Like, for example, I was at a community event and I was sharing what I do, and somebody said, oh, if this was 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Well, it's 2025, it's an
Mm,
issue, and we are having this conversation. It affects millions of Americans.
right.
So I think a lot of progress needs to be made. And my goal with the advocacy is to be a voice in that change on the political side as well. We need some policies put into place that protect people with mental health needs. And there's just not enough of them. We have ADA, but it's not always enforced like it should be. I know there's talks now about going back to institutions. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world at this time surrounding mental health, and it can make people scared. So I think we just need to kind of meet people when they are safe enough to disclose this kind of information with empathy, kindness, compassion, and grace. It takes a lot of guts to admit that you have a mental health problem in the world today. And if we meet people with kindness, empathy, compassion, and grace and offer support instead of negativity, it may lend them to want to get some help and want to get some healing.
No, absolutely. So in your experience, it's kind of a controversial topic, but funding. How do you get, because obviously you need money to make things happen, right? Because
Right.
people want to get paid. It's very hard to find volunteer people that want to spend time and time and time and not make any money. From your experience, how has the funding been? Are there charitable organizations? I know your answer is probably going to be there isn't any, but for the most part, like what branches do you reach out to try to find some for the community, right? Because obviously there are government grants, there are certain things that they can do for you, but they're very limited. How is that?
Right.
How has your experience been with that?
Funding is difficult. My most of my time with J&E has been unfunded. I have used my personal money to make it go. I have volunteered countless hours. My staff are interns. They volunteer their time. Space for groups is donated. You know, it takes a community who believes in the mission to make things like this get off the ground. We are looking at privatized grants and like donations to keep us going. We would like to get paid. We do have bills too. That is important. But, to get a nonprofit off the ground, you really need sweat equity. And that's really what we've been doing. And I know a lot of mental health agencies are for profit and they can charge insurance and things like that. And that's more how they stay afloat. But grassroots movements, so much of it is volunteer and pro bono work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, what's not necessarily change the subject, but you have a person that comes to you and says, listen, something's not right. I'm either having suicidal ideology, I'm seeing things, I'm hearing voices. What's your first step into helping that person? Like, what would you do? And kind of walk us through the process, because there might be some people that are watching this or might know somebody who's going through this. What would you tell them? Like, what would be your advice for them?
Right. So if someone wants to come to me and say they have suicidal ideations or something like that, first I would listen with empathy because they're vulnerable enough to share this with me and they're reaching out for help. And I would not leave them alone. I wouldn't say, oh, go call somebody. What I would do is I would call somebody. I would reach out to support networks. Do they have a therapist? Do they have a doctor? Can I take them to a treatment facility like our crisis unit? Do I need to drive them out of county to a hospital? Because that is a crisis moment. I know for me personally, when I'm in crisis, I have a crisis plan. And so my support team knows what to do based on my words. But I think the most important thing you can do to begin with is to listen and help them get supports. The last time I was feeling that way myself, the first thing out of my husband's mouth was, why would you do that to me? And that didn't help at all.
Mm-hmm.
Passing judgment or guilting me about feelings was not helpful, but him listening and letting me express how I felt was helpful.
Okay. So that obviously is the extreme of a situation, right? Where somebody is basically, how does somebody like that comes to you and says, I just deal with anxiety and then my anxiety makes me depressed because I can't get out of this funk. Like, let's take it to the least extreme, right? Somebody just says, I'm having a bad day and I can't get out of this, what we call funk, right? Most people are like, it's, for basically layman's terms, is that's what it is. Obviously it's anxiety and somewhat depression, and they're feeling their worth is a little bit. So obviously I asked about the extreme situation. How would you deal with somebody like that just says, I've been having a couple bad days, and those bad days now are turning into bad weeks, and those bad weeks are turning into bad months?
Right. So I think the first step I would do is what we call motivational interviewing, which is like a gentle way of talking to them and understanding did something get them there, how they're feeling now, and what their next steps are. And also assessing, do they have any coping tools in their toolbox? Like, do they have anything they're leaning on? Are they open to seeing a therapist? Are they open to seeing a doctor? Is there a transitional life that event that's happening that's making them feel this way? And if they don't have any tools in their toolbox, I can offer some tools. Like you said, anxiety. Well, grounding and breathing techniques are excellent ways to help with anxiety. Like, for example, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can smell, etc., etc. And it's about getting out of our heads and getting out of those emotions and recentering ourselves, as well as box breathing. So just offering resources. We do this in our groups. And people give their lived experience in group. We advertise that group isn't therapy. What group is a community to share common experiences, common coping skills, and grow together.
Mm. So now, obviously, I was going to ask you about the groups. What are the size of an average group? Could it be 1 to 2 people? Is it usually 3 to 4? Like, give us kind of an idea of how many people actually are willing to attend these.
Right. So groups are slow to start notoriously. Our online group is for anyone living with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or bipolar type, and we typically have anywhere from 2 to 6 people in a group at a time.
Okay.
Our in-person groups are anywhere from 1 to 5. We don't tell people they can't come, but I think the hardest part about groups is getting them to come the first time. Opening up to a group of strangers is difficult, and admitting that you might need supports is difficult. But once people come and understand, okay, this is confidential, this is safe, then they enjoy it and they come back.
Okay. Now, I know it's a little bit controversial to bring this up, but I think it needs to be talked about. How are like religious services in your area? Like, do churches open their doors to help? Do like some, congregations open their doors? I know it really is that fine line of community involvement, but it seems that they're the most willing to accept that. Is that what you find generally? Is that or
Right. So I live in the South, so there's a
okay,
lot of religion here.
sure.
In the areas where I have groups already, the churches have not been involved.
Okay.
It's been nonprofit and other agencies who have helped me out. But we are trying to move into a new county, and we are working with a non-denominational church to try to do so.
Okay.
They opened the conversation about needing mental health services for their congregation, and we said, hey, we can provide a support group and connect you with therapists and things like that. So one of my team members is going to their community meetings to learn what kind of services we can aid to their community as well.
Okay. I just know it's like I said, it's kind of a touchy subject because, but it seems to be that they're they seem to be the most accepting of that. And it's very weird because most people, religion for most people is private and they don't want to talk about it. But when it comes to their mental health issues, it seems like, congregations are usually the most accepting of it and want to help the community more than any government agency seems to want to. In my experience, that's why I asked about it.
Right. It can be. A lot of congregations around here are loving and they want their congregation to be okay and feel better. And they work
Mm,
with the community to find necessary resources. And it's a loving environment. I just haven't had the interaction as much lately, but I would never turn one away. I
sure.
would never not help them because it's a beautiful community.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier the online community, right? And the power of social media. How has that been in establishing this, talking to people that might be across the country or across the world, saying you should do this, 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 and this? Has that been a positive experience for you?
I think social media can be a dangerous place
It sure
if
can
you
be.
When I have groups online, it's a safe place. Like, you know, you have to talk to me first to get in, and I have to let you in to keep that safe
Sure.
unit. And um you know, people enjoy because those diagnoses are more rare. Like, I know a lot of them had never met anybody with that diagnosis before, and finding a community of like-minded people is extremely healing, and seeing how others progress and learning from each other has been very beneficial. But when it comes to just like talking about mental health on social media, there's a ton of backlash. Like,
Hmm.
you know, I go to school, I work, I pay my taxes, I'm a functioning member, but I'm also told I should be locked in a loony bin, and told that I'm crazy, and told to be quiet, this isn't an issue. So I think it's just where on social media you are.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense. My attitude was more along the line of how has it been in that community online, like the mental health community? Have they been generally supportive and giving ideas and sharing, thoughts and processes, or has it kind of been like we figured it out, we're going to keep it to us because we have this situation figured out, and then they don't share it with it? Because it's like that with podcasting, right? Obviously, that's how I met you in a podcasting group. There are a lot of podcasters that figured it out. They know how to make money, they know how to get guests, they know how to, and they keep that tight knit secret. And then there's other
Yes.
podcasters that are like, listen, do this, this, and this. It's not hard to figure out. These were my guests. I'll give you a lifeline.
it,
Contact this person, talk to this person. They're very helpful. But a lot of the
it's
community, once they figure it out, they bottle that in. They don't want their secret to get out.
Yes, that is a huge issue with support groups online, especially on forums that are just like, you know, typing, that have a lot of followers. You're not allowed to talk about what you do for people as well. I've been banned, I've been ridiculed for trying to share a free resource on their pages. Um, and it just perplexes me when you're offering a free healing resource or asking to collaborate to help more people, why it's so closed off. This is mine, this is yours, we can't work together.
Okay. I just thought it might be in that way because, like I said, a lot of times, especially with donations, right? If somebody finds a big donor and they're willing to donate high five figure, six figure, sometimes even seven figure, you know, amounts of money to a thing, they don't want anybody else accessing that person because they want the money to keep coming in. Where a lot of the communities might say, listen, well, we'll take a couple of the dollars we got that we were fortunate enough to get and give it to you and help you out. But it seems like once you find that kind of person that's willing to donate that kind of money, you want that person for yourself. You're not willing to share their assets. And I think it's kind of, in my, from what I've been told about the mental health stuff, is that when people usually find a connection, they keep that connection tight-lipped. They don't want to
Yeah,
share it.
I don't feel that way at all personally. I share
Okay,
resources.
sure,
I will, when I get grant letters, I mass send it. Apply for this grant, because it's not about me and it's not
correct,
about J&E. It's about helping people.
sure. So yeah, so I, like I said, I just wanted to know how you felt about it because I could see where a lot of it is, where unfortunately our society runs on money, right? It's a big thing, and when you find it, most people don't want to share it, and it's been, my experience and my, past of dealing with certain individuals is that once you get that, you don't want to let it out. And like, I've always been an advocate of sharing your information, right? Putting it out there. If I know a way to help you, I'm going to tell you how to get help. And if I can, steer you financially to what I did, like, it shouldn't be a secret. My opinion is like, what you gain off of what I gain because I was lucky enough to get it. But a lot of people don't have that mentality. They just kind of want to keep it for themselves. It's like once they figure out the secret, or the recipe, as they say, it's theirs.
And I find that to be surprising in the mental health world initially. I was like, isn't this about helping people? Like, why are we making this a secret? Why are we not sharing services? Why are we not collaborating?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is bigger than us. This is somebody's life.
Sure. Now, and obviously you said you live in a small community and you're next to a bigger community. How is your government agencies, are they open to hearing it when you go to like your municipal meetings, or you go and you maybe talk to a mayor or a president of a town? Are they open to hearing and sitting down with you? Or are they kind of like, don't bother me with this?
You know, I've done outreach in two towns. Agencies like public health are very welcoming, very understanding, and want to collaborate. But when I reach out, the town I actually live in, I am meeting with the town manager on Monday. He has been good.
Okay.
Um, but the town next door where I do a lot of my outreach, they will not give me the time of day.
Okay.
They won't at all.
Now, do you think there might be one particular event where they might see it looking outside of that scope and say, listen, what you're doing is actually really good. Maybe we should give you that. Is that your hope? Is that they see it from like an outside perspective? Maybe one of their family members is going through something and they tell
Right.
them like what a good job you did and that now they start to realize.
So I'm hopeful. We're planning a mental health simulation with a couple of joint agencies, and
Okay.
our goal with that is to give them an idea, if they attend, of what it's like to walk and navigate life living with mental illness. And we're going to offer follow-up training services. And I'm hopeful that getting to experience just a quick minute of it, of what it really takes during the day, that it can open their eyes a little bit. But you're absolutely right, not just them, but a lot of society ignores this until it affects their child, their partner, their friend, their mom. And mental health doesn't discriminate. It can affect any of us at any time. So it saddens me that we can't love one another and support each other, but we have to wait until we're directly affected.
Right. And that's the big thing, right? Like when when somebody's dealing with mental health, it's not really an issue until it's an issue, right? Once it becomes acute and now they're crazy or they're psychotic or they're but all the signs leading up to that were always avoided. They were just kind of, tucked away. And then all of a sudden they have one event that were quote, and I hate this word, but everybody uses it when they snap, right? They hit their breaking point and then they went from normal to crazy. Well, there were probably a lot of incidences that they were going through that we were just ignored, either by family members or by the community. And I think that the awakening of this needs to be brought to a grander scale, right? When somebody first comes and says, listen, I think something might be wrong, instead of saying you're just having a bad day, brush it off, like actually talking to them and acknowledging what might be going on, right? Because, like I said, one bad day might lead into another bad day, might lead into another bad day. And now they do something drastic at the end of this where you would say, wow, that person just went crazy. Well, no, they didn't just go. They've been trying to ask for help and nobody's been helping them, right? So it wasn't a just happening. It was a process of them dealing with more bad stuff, more bad stuff, more bad stuff. And there was no outlet for them to go.
That's so true. And I think that's one reason why I'm so open about my story, because people aren't educated on the warning signs. And, I'm a very transparent person. I'll go to community events, I'll go anywhere and share extensively. And I do it with the mission of educating. When this happens, this is a warning sign, and this is what you do, and this is where you go for help. And that's why I offer the educational training, and that's why I offer the support groups, because if you don't know, you don't know. And some
Right.
people do know and they ignore it. And then or they hide it from the people around them. And like you said, then people say they snapped or went crazy. But in reality, this thing was a buildup.
Sure. Absolutely. Um, just out of curiosity too, I want to touch on this a little bit. Have you had any issues with like the VA or like former military members coming up? Because I think their community is more accepting than any other community out there now about stuff that they've been through and trauma that they've endured during their service to our country. And it seems to be that they are the one group that doesn't mind talking about it openly and candidly. Is there any outreach to those guys and girls?
Yes, in my area, we have veteran services, and they actually put on a phenomenal suicide awareness summit not that long ago in my community. And the amazing veterans shared their experiences and shared their stories, and the family members who lost someone shared their stories. And it was touching, and it was an awareness event, it was an educational event. And I feel like they do a really good job of opening the conversation and collaborating with the community.
Okay. Now, in your community, right? Everybody has police and fire, right? Have you gone to like those guys and girls and been like, "Hey, have you served in the military?" Like, because a lot of times with firemen, especially, right? Like they deal with these crises firsthand. Somebody calls 911 and says, "My child's acting erratically." Well, the first people that are going to show up are the police and firemen. Have they been open to talking to you about it, or have they kind of,
I have
I
re-
know. they have HIPAA laws and stuff like that that they can't obviously, share. But from their own experiences dealing with it, have they been able to communicate with you at all, or has that not been an option?
They will not speak to me. I have reached
Okay.
out to multiple police agencies trying to offer, a conversation because so frequently in my community people are just arrested and not given the supports they need, and I've had people tell me that's their default. I'm just going to arrest them, like whatever.
Hmm.
So I've tried to open the conversation, but they just ignore me. I'm hopeful with the simulation that they'll begin to want to talk about it, and I'm no way saying they're all like ignoring
No.
me. It's just the people I've
Yeah.
reached out to.
Okay.
But one of my partners is a LCSW with a private practice, and she's trying to create a first responders therapeutic program for them because they have a lot of trauma themselves. And I'm hopeful that introducing them to services for themselves will make them want to open the conversation about the people they serve as well.
Okay. Now, just out of curiosity, in your community for law enforcement and firemen especially, do they go through like crisis intervention training? Like, do they go through CIT classes? Do you know if they have to
Yes,
go
they
through that?
do.
Is that a
They
mandated
do.
thing? Okay. So, I mean, that in itself helps, right? Because that opens the door to the possibility of dealing with somebody who might just be in a mental crisis and isn't necessarily a criminal. So there are steps in the right direction to have that, to happen. From your experience starting, J&E at basically the ground level to where it's at now, obviously it seems like it's successful. Is there a kind of ideology that you have of grandeur of what you would like to eventually accomplish? Like, what would be your end goal for this?
My end goal is to graduate and get introduce advocacy into the community. There are advocacy agencies in surrounding communities, but I'm not aware of any in my community. And an advocacy agency would be great. Maybe they're not talking to me right now because I'm not an advocate. Maybe they're not talking to me around because I'm still a baby nonprofit. I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful. And once I graduate and have that MSW behind my name, maybe they'll be more willing to work with me. And maybe I can get involved in the political arena a little bit in policy change and fighting for equitable policy. And I would love to expand and have more support groups and more healing environments in other communities as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know I talked about it a little bit before with local politicians. Have you ever gone to your like state congressman and like tried to talk to them, or go to your state senators, or go to your delegates that maybe outside of your community, like going to your capital and writing letters? Is that something you've done, or is that kind of something you want to do? Or
I have done that. I
okay,
have found out who my congressmen and senators are,
okay,
and I have sent them emails, and I have gotten no feedback.
okay. So, because a lot of times when obviously I don't want to say that it's they have a lot of stuff on their plate, but sometimes those emails never get to them, right? They have a secretary or a filter, and they say, okay, the super important stuff gets sent to them directly. The kind of stuff maybe, and then at the very bottom they might just say, okay, this is just going to get tabled until they have time, and then they never have time. Is there any event that you could think of that you might like be able to run into them personally and like sit down and talk to them? Or do you invite them to your local community stuff? Have you tried that? I'm just curious
Yes.
if that's
I invited them to the
sure.
simulation. I
Okay.
was hopeful they would come, and I'm going to keep trying to get them to come
Sure.
because I do believe it'll be an eye opening experience. And, maybe they can meet some important people in my community.
Absolutely. So now that you're getting your degree and you're going to graduate with this, you said before that they might now pay attention to you. What goes into getting this degree from your schooling for your graduate classes? Is it like stuff that's more hands-on, or like what are you learning through this process? Can you kind of give us a little insight on that?
Definitely. So I'm getting my master's in social work. So I have coursework as well as internships. And so I have both the book and the hands-on experience. And the beauty of my program is that it teaches you the whole scope of social work. So social workers can be therapists, advocates. There's so many things that a social worker can do, and they teach the whole scope. Your first year is really about learning every avenue of social work, and then you decide a concentration. So it's called micro or macro. Micro is therapy, macro is like everything else. and I have decided to go macro. And it's a beautiful program, and they teach you everything from what is oppression to how to give a direct practice therapy session. They try to teach you to be a a well-rounded social worker.
Okay. So if you had a 15-year-old kid that's going to high school and says, I'm not sure what I want to do with my life, and they talk to you and said, tell me about what you do, what would their course of action be from high school to college to graduate? What would you tell them to take? What classes would you tell them to get involved in?
Definitely. Well, my undergrad is actually in special education. I used to be a teacher in a past life.
Okay.
So, but if they really wanted to get into social work, there's if they wanted to be a therapist, there's two routes. I would tell them to take either social work or psychology in undergrad after they graduate high school. You know, enjoy high school, do your best, grow a little bit, and then when you get to college, I wouldn't tell someone necessarily you have to take this track, right? Because we grow and change so much at that
Mm-hmm.
age. We may change our minds, but I would say take a psychology class, take a social work class, see if it's interesting to you, see if that's truly something you want to do. And when you finish undergrad, apply to multiple graduate schools because you never know which program is going to be the best fit for you. Find something that is going to really align with you. Not all programs are the same. And I would make sure they have that passion because this work can be hard. You really have to have that passion underneath it.
Okay. Now, as we're wrapping up the conversation, there's obviously a lot more to talk about, and there's only so much you can squeeze in 45 minutes or an hour. Um, when we wrap this up, Maddie, where could we find you? Where could people find your assistance if they need it, or where can they find J&E on uh, line?
Definitely. So our website is www.jesupport.org. We're on, if you Google J&E Support Group, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And then my email is on all of those platforms, and I check it really regularly. And I'm happy to send you an email. If I can't help you, I always say my job is to connect you with somebody who can. I'm only one person, I'm only a peer support specialist. But if you need help beyond me, I'm more than happy to help you get that.
Well, that's awesome. Maddie, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. You are a wealth of knowledge. I wish the best for you. How much longer till you actually get your degree? Like, is this in the process or are you close? Is the light at the end of the tunnel?
I'm like halfway through. I got a little bit of time left.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is maybe next month or the month after, kind of have you back on and talk about it, and then maybe we could focus more on your schooling and what you're actually doing in that way, and then we can kind of follow your track and have you back on and see what becomes of everything and get you in the direction that you're heading.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of school, and I love my program. It's the top 4 social work program in the country. Go Heels.
All right.
So I would love to talk about it.
Perfect. All right, Maddie. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate everything. Guys, Maddie can be found. I'm going to link all her stuff on the YouTube video when it gets put out tonight after I publish it and do some editing. But I'll link everything with Maddie on that. You can find me at One Fun Guy Podcast on YouTube. That's where this video will be. Obviously, we did it live on Facebook, but this will be posted on YouTube. My channel will be posted and all of Maddie's stuff will be linked. So, Maddie, thank you again for being a great
Thank
guest, and we'll
you.
have you back soon.
Bye, guys.